Welcome to the only daily podcast focusing on compliance news of the day. Each morning, start your day with a cup of coffee and Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, to hear about 4 of the top compliance, corruption, or leadership stories you will need to start your day. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
April 27, 2020, the Workers' Health Edition. Well, it looks like the Trump administration is going to attempt to completely eviscerate worker health around the coronavirus by proposing a liability shield, which would prevent businesses from being sued by both employees and customers who contract coronavirus. Obviously, this would be a huge negative for both customers and employees, and really subject the American public to the Trump's administration's desire to reopen the economy and get it back up to speed so Trump can get reelected. So not only is it going to put the rest of us at risk, but you now will have no recourse for it. So it'd be interesting to see if they can get this through Congress. And the Trump administration continues their complete evisceration of worker protection, and now they move it to consumer and customer protection. Next up, from Dylan Tokar over at the Wall Street Journal Risk and Compliance Journal, FCPA anti-bribery, anti-corruption enforcement will continue and has to continue. David Furr, Assistant Chief of the DOJ's Anti-Foreign Corruption Bribery Unit, that's the FCPA unit, said that reporting and detecting misconduct continue to be very important for companies to do. He said prosecutors are trying to be reasonable given the conditions, but compliance has to continue. His comments came on a Global Healthcare LLC webinar. Obviously, the pandemic has taken a toll on the government's ability to investigate, so that means that the mechanics of how the government does its job have been affected. So this makes self-disclosure even more important. And if companies hide information about violations, I think the government will come down much harder now because the government is so constrained in terms of investigations. They're really going to depend more on self-disclosure. So Boeing, as reported by the New York Times, in what can only be characterized as a fit of sanity, has terminated its $4.2 billion deal to buy a stake in the Embraer business unit. The aviation giant, struggling with the 737 MAX crisis and canceled orders, really has no business moving forward with this merger or purchase, and if it did so, it would face just eviscerating negative publicity for, one, claiming they need $60 billion, and two, wasting it on a purchase of a rival airline. So congrats to Boeing for actually coming to the right decision and making the right choice given the toxic nature of their culture going forward. And finally, in a very odd story from the New York Times, it appears 5 Huawei employees were imprisoned by the Chinese government because they raised a subject on a WeChat conversation about doing business in Iran. So this is something that Huawei has denied vociferously, and now if it turns out you have employees talking about doing business in Iran, probably means the company was doing business in Iran, and certainly would lead to additional pressures on jailed executive in Canada, the former CFO, on her claim that the company was not doing business in Iran, and would support the U.S. government's position, which Huawei has denied throughout these proceedings, that it is doing business in Iran. So very interesting development in the Huawei case going forward. I hope you are staying safe and working from home, and even if one of the Republican governors has reopened your state, you're still exercising caution. You're staying safe, self-distancing, and isolating during this time. Thank you for listening. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network and a proud member of C-Suite Radio. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow.